Okay, so we are in Daf Mem Tes Amid Base 49b at really at the bottom. We're really at the top of 50a Nun Amid Aleph. Just going to share the screen. So we have in the Mishnah told us that if somebody is outside of a city and the distance of the city is 2,000 amma from the center of a tree, and they are about 2,000 amma from that tree, so they're not going to make it into town by the time the sun sets, and so they want to, and they designate themselves a space beneath that tree. So the halacha is that if they didn't designate their space, they didn't say which 4 ammas, the southernmost or the northernmost, but rather they just say 4 ammas underneath the tree, or they say underneath the tree. So then that's a problem, because if they meant the northern end of the tree, so that's great. They're within 2,000 amma of home. But if they meant the southern end of the tree, they are beyond 2,000 amma from home, and they won't be able to make it into their house. So we had a machlokas at the end of Mem Tes Amud Beis between Rav and Shmuel. Rav says they cannot move at all. This person cannot move at all. They can't even go to the tree, which is within their 2,000 amma. And Shmuel says, no, they can go to the tree. They just simply can't go from the tree to the house. So Rav is going to explain the reason of why Rav would say they can't even go the first 2,000 amma. Why did they lose that? After all, you always have 2,000 amma from your space, and you should be able to go there. So Amar Rabba, and this is at the top of Nun Amud Aleph 58. Amar Rabba, Rabba said, my time in the Rabba. What's the reasoning of Rabba? Because he didn't define his place, and since he didn't define his place, he had made it clear that his current space is not where his Shabbos is, where his Shvisa is. He also defined somewhere underneath the tree, but that didn't work because beneath the tree is undefined as well, and therefore it does not work. However, those is the second version of what Rabbah said. Anything that you cannot do one subsequent to the other, you cannot do it at the same time. And here, what he did at the same time was he made all the space beneath the tree as his Shabbos, because he said underneath the tree, and he didn't define where. So if he had subsequently done that, meaning he first said the 4 ammas, southernmost 4 ammas are my space for Shabbos, and then he said the northernmost, or vice versa, you couldn't do that because you can't have them both be your space. Therefore, at once as well, it also wouldn't work. And this is the concept of anything that you can't do subsequent to each other, you also cannot do them simultaneous to each other. And therefore, it didn't work. So what distinction is there between these two interpretations? My benayu. If he says 4 out of the 8 or more ammas that are underneath this tree, and later we'll see that the tree has to have a minimum of 8 ammas in order for this halacha to be true, because if it has less than that, the eruv will work, and we'll see later. But at this point, it's 8 or more. So if he had said, instead of saying underneath the tree is my space, but rather he said any of the 4 amos, but any 4 amos underneath the tree, then it would work according to one opinion. And so the one that said he didn't define it, he didn't define his place, it wouldn't work. However, according to the opinion that says no, because you can't do them subsequent, right? And therefore they cannot be done simultaneously either. Actually, he's not trying to do it simultaneously or a subsequent. He just wants one set of 4 ammas to be his. 4 ammas is his place. It's just undefined which one it is. But he's not trying to make multiple 4 amma spaces. He's not making all the space underneath the tree his Shabbos space. He just said specifically 4 ammas from underneath the tree is mine, and there it would work. This is just like 4 ammas because he defined and said, all I want is 4 ammas from underneath the tree. Fine. So we have two interpretations of why Rav says that the Eruv does not work at all and he can't move from where he is. He doesn't have the 2,000 amma and it doesn't work at the tree. And based on these two reasonings, we said if he had defined and said instead of anywhere underneath the tree or underneath the tree, he said 4 amos beneath the tree, that according to the second version would be a valid Eruv. Now the Gemara is going to challenge this concept. We just said a concept that Rabbi said the concept of anything that cannot be done subsequent to each other cannot be done simultaneously either. And we say, okay, is that really true? Do we see elsewhere where it seems to work? Gufa. So to the statement itself. Anything that you cannot do one subsequent to the other, they would not be valid. So therefore they're not valid even when you do them simultaneously. Ace, he asked him a question. Abaye challenged Rabba. If somebody has tides his produce, he takes maaser. So you have, let's say, 100 pounds of wheat, 100 pounds of apples, pomegranates, whatever it may be. So you have 100 pounds. You have to take 10 pounds as your maaser. But you are not exacting. You just took a whole bundle, and it ended up that it was 15 pounds. So you took an additional 5% that wasn't supposed to be taken. So the produce that you tithe, the 85% that remains, that's edible because it now has been tithed. So it's permissible to be eaten. However, the 15% that you have actually has 10% tithe and 5% untithed produce because you never took 10% from there. So therefore, it's going to, you cannot eat the mixture of the 15%, which has 10% tithe, 5% untithed produce, because there was never, no one ever took 10% off of that, and therefore it's going to be it's not permissible even for the Levi, which you normally would gift it to eat. Now the Gemara challenges, says, hey, how does this work? If I were to take 10% and then take an additional 5%, for sure it wouldn't work. So why, when I took the 15%, does it work? We should say you took 15%. If you try them subsequent to each other, it wouldn't work. So even simultaneously, it doesn't work. And therefore, even the 85% is untithed. And nothing should be, it should be as if nothing happened. You can throw the 15% back in and take your 10% exactly. So why over there do we say that anything work, that the tithe even permits the remaining 85% to be eaten? It's as if nothing happened, because since they cannot be done subsequent to each other, they cannot be done simultaneously either. So that's the question. Why do we say that the produce is fixed and the tithes are mixed? It should be nothing happened. So Gemara says, actually, the reason over there is something else. There, the reason is because when I give a pomegranate, I take a pomegranate from Meiser, I can actually say half the pomegranate is Meiser. It doesn't have to be the whole thing. So therefore, I could essentially, if I need to take 10% tithe, I can take 20% and say all of the pomegranates that I took as my Meiser, half of them are Meiser. And then it's 10% because I gave of the 20% half, but each fruit, half of the fruit. That's a permissible way of doing tithing, of Meiser. And therefore, when I took the 15% as well, essentially what I'm doing is I'm saying of each one of the kernels of grain or the pomegranates or whatever it is, 2/3 are a tithe, 10 and 1/3's not, or whatever the mixture is. And that's why it works. It's not that I'm doing it subsequent or simultaneously. I'm actually just taking partial a part of each one of the pieces of produce and making it a tithe. The Amar Tiktosh Palga Palga the Chitzim Kacha. Because if he had said each kernel, each of wheat, I wanted half of it to be Meiser, Kitcha, it would be sanctified. So therefore it works over there. Fine. So the Gemara says, well, we have another challenge to this halacha. What about tithing of animals? We know all the animals born that year, you have to take them through a corral and As each one passes, you count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and the 10th one you strike and you say this one is the tithe and it's brought as a korban. And there you can't do halves. You can't say half of the animal is meiser. The entire 10th animal is meiser. And yet we learn v'amar either Rabba or Rava yatzu shnayim b'asiri. If I counted 7, 8, 9, and then at 10, 2 animals come out at once. So now I counted them both as the 10th, but one is 10 and one is 11. The Koran Asiri. So then I have a problem because Asiri v'chadasar mu'uravin zabezeh. It works, and you now have a 10th and an 11th combined. One of them is Kodesh, one of them is a 10th. I don't know which one it is. So I have to bring them both as a korban, one as a shlomim, one as a tithe, as a meiser. And meiser and shlomim are somewhat interchangeable. Rashi goes through the distinctions and tells you how to make sure that the distinctions are done correctly for each. But for our subject matter, what we need is that even though that I cannot subsequently do one and the other, I cannot tie the 10th and the 11th, but when they came out simultaneously, you said that it worked. Why did it work? None of them should be the tithe, because after all, it happened simultaneously, and it can't happen subsequent, so nothing happened simultaneous. So Gemara says there too, it's actually not so. You could do it subsequent, because the halacha is that by mistake, if you counted number 11 as 10, it counts as number 10. If you made it, it's possible to do number 10 and 11 by mistake. The Tanan, as we learned in the Mishnah. So he's counting 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. He's up to 9. And what happens is, as the 10th one's coming through, as the 9th one's coming through, he forgets where he's up to and he says 10. So for the 9th one, he counted 10 and he pronounced it as meiser, but it was really only the 9th. Then as the 10th one came, he said, well, what did you just do? I'm up to 9. 9. So the 10th one he called 9. Then for the 11th, he calls 10. So he's entirely famished here, right? He did the 9th one, he called 10. Realizing he made a mistake, he called the 10th one 9. And instead of going back to 11, he continues from 9 to 10, counting the 11th one as 10. Kara Lachi Asiri counted the 9th one as 10. Va'asiri Lachi. And the Lasiri Chi. And then the 10th one, he called number 9. Ulachadasar Asiri. And then the 11th one, he called 10. Shloshtam Kodashim. They all are Kodesh, are sanctified as a tithe. The 9th one, because he pronounced it as 10. The 11th one, because he pronounced it as 10. The 10th one, because it is the 10th, even though he called it 9. So since we see that subsequent to a pronouncement of 10, or subsequent to the 10th one coming through, the 11th one, if you pronounce it as 10 can count as a meiser if you did so by mistake. So to here, when they came out together, one of them is going to be meiser because it does work subsequently if you did so by mistake. Okay, so we have a third case that we're going to ask and say, what about this case where you cannot by mistake pronounce it, and yet it works simultaneously? What's the case? We know a korban toda is a gift offering, a Thanksgiving offering for somebody who was somebody who was in a dangerous situation, ill, in a desert, on the seas, in prison, and he came out. He brings a korban, a Thanksgiving offering, and with it he brings 40 breads. 4 sets of 10 breads, 3 types that are matzah, 1 type that's chametz. So he brings 40 breads. But this fella brought 80 breads, double of each one of the sets. You can't, subsequent to one, sanctify another set of breads, and you can't do it by mistake. And yet, we learn, when they brought the korban toda and they shechted it, there were 80 breads dedicated to it. So Chizkiya Amar Kitchu Allah Memitach Shmoni. Chizkiya says, amongst those 80, 40 of them are sanctified. Rabbi Yochanan Rabbi Yochanan says, no, 40 are not sanctified. Now, according to Chizkiya, we see that it's subsequent. It simultaneously, even though you did them simultaneously, it works, even though you can't do it subsequent. So why does it work? Why are the 40 even sanctified? So Gemara says, no, ha'itma Allah, we explained over there already the reason. Amar Rabbi, either Rabbi Zera or Rabbi Shubin Levi, the explanation was given. That if somebody said, if this person was sanctified, it said, I only mean to bring 40 of these breads. Of course, only that it'll work. Everybody would agree to that. If he says, I don't want 40 to work unless all 80 are sanctified. I don't want only 40. I want all 80, and if I can't have all 80 sanctified, none are sanctified. Everybody agrees it doesn't work because you can't have 80. So what's the machlokas here? What is the basis of this machlokas? Bistama, where I did not explain, I did not tell you what I intended. I brought 80 of these breads, but I didn't tell you what they were for. One says, well, the reason he brought 80 was, but he really only meant to bring 40. And the other the other set of 40, the second set of 40 is just in case 20 of them go missing, 20 of them become tummy, something goes wrong. So he's got a backup in case something happens. And he brought it on condition. If some go bad, it's okay. And one says, no, the reason is he intends for a large carbon, and that's why it doesn't work. So Chizkiah says it works because he only meant to bring 40, and the other 40 just are just a insurance policy. And Rabbi Yochanan says, no, he meant to bring a big carbon, and that's why it's not going to be good. Amar Abaye. So Abaye said, back to our Mishnah, and he says, L'shanu ela be'ilan shatachtav yud beis ama. So he explains that this idea that we said, that Rav said that it's not going to be a valid, it's not going to be valid when he defines the beneath the tree. He said, I want make my Eruv underneath the tree. That's only if the tree is at least 12 amma wide. But if the tree was only 11 amma wide, well then, if we give him the middle 4 amos, he's going to overlap with the southernmost 4 amos and the northernmost 4 amos. So if we give him the middle, he's for sure, at least in part, in the space he designated, and it should work. But if there's less than 12 amma, some of it for sure we can tell. If we give him the middle 4, he's at least in part connected to either one of the places that it would be, so that should be good. To Maskef Rav Yeshua said that's great, but who tells you that to give him the middle? If he only had the southernmost, then he's not in there. Or if he only had the northernmost, then he's not going to be in his space. Who told you that he meant the middle 4? Maybe he meant either the northernmost or the southernmost, and then he's not in his space. So he rather defined it differently. He said if the tree is less than 8 amos underneath it, there's 7. So there, wherever you put him, he's going to be overlapping at least in part with his space. So if he's at the middle of the tree, he's for sure in his space. But if there are 7 amos, some of the place is going to be for sure known, and therefore he can travel to beneath the tree because with the center of the tree for sure will be within his Shabbos space. Going back to the Mishnah, we have 2 interpretations. We have 2 interpretations as to what it means that if he had said beneath the tree without defining it, Rav says he cannot budge from where he is, since he didn't define where he's going, or maybe it cannot be done subsequent to each other, it can't be done simultaneously, so he cannot go anywhere. And Shmuel says, no, he can go to the tree, he just can't go to the house. Why can he go to the tree? He can go to the tree because it's within 2,000 amma, but he cannot go to the house because maybe the 4 amos that he defined were the southernmost, which are the farthest from his house, and 2,000 amas from there doesn't reach his house. Fine. So we are going to have a brisa that concurs with either one of these opinions. Tanya Kavasei the Rav, Tanya Kavasei the Shmuel. Tanya Kavasei the Rav. We have a brisa that concurs with Rav. Misha Baba Derech, somebody's traveling, and it's becoming dark for him. Makir Ilan Oigader. And he knows of a tree or fence or something that's 2,000 amas exactly outside of the city. And he says, look, we're going to make my Shabbos beneath that tree. I am making my Shabbos beneath that tree. Lo Amar Klum. He didn't say anything, which we're going to see in the Brisa is defined as he cannot budge from where he is. But if he says, I'm going to a specific place and he defines the space, then he could go to that particular place. For instance, if he said, I know that there's a fenced-in farm just 2,000 am outside of the city, he can travel to that place. And not only can he travel to that place, but inside that space, since it's in a fenced-in area, he can walk the entirety. He can go the entirety of that space plus beyond it 2,000 amma. Now, when is that true? If he defined the space. For instance, if he said on that hillside, which is 10 tefachim high, and the top of it is either 4 amos big or as large as up to 70 by 70, which is a base of sign. V'chein bika, or a ditch, shehi amuka yud ve'ir base of sign, which is 10 tefachim deep, 4 amos by or up to a base of sign, which is 70 by 70. Aval, however, b'makam she'ein masuyim. But if he did not specifically define, the space, ein lo ela daled amos, then he only has 4 amos. That means he didn't say, I'm going to that farm, I'm not going, or that house, or whatever it is. He simply said, I'm going to a specific space. It says 2,000 amma out of the city where that boulder is, or where that fork in the road is, whatever it may be. Since it's not a defined enclosed space, he only has at that space 4 amos.
Question. Yeah. What if he gets to the tree and there's a fence around the tree that extends the full diameter of the canopy of the tree?
So that would be this case. That would be valid. That would be valid, and he would be able to travel the entirety of that space because it counts. Anything that's enclosed counts as single 4 amos. Since it's enclosed, it doesn't make a difference if it's 30 amos. It counts as a 4 amma place because it's enclosed, as long as it's not 70 by 70. Now, what happens if it's 2 people walking together? One of them knows where they're going, and one doesn't know where they're going. One says, I know of a place, a tree, underneath there we can make our Shabbos, and the other doesn't. So, Shvisasi b'makim pleni. If he defines the 4 amos, it'll be fine. But if he did not define the 4 amos that he's going to, neither of them can move from where they are. But the Brisa now says if he didn't define it, he cannot move anywhere. That concurs with Rav. And as a question to Shmuel, so let's say that's a contradiction to Shmuel. So Gemara says, Shmuel says, no, this Brisa is different. The case is that from where he's standing right now as the sun is setting, to the base of the tree, to the trunk of the tree is 2,000 amma. Or actually it's 2,004 because he's allowed 4 ammas plus another 2,000. And therefore, he can only get to half the canopy of the tree. The other part of the canopy of the tree is outside of his space. He can't actually get there. So when he said beneath the tree, it may mean a space that's beyond where he can go, and therefore it doesn't count as a good Eruv because it actually is beyond where he can go. Because if you're going to say that it meant on the other end, the Elon, so it's beyond his Tchum, and therefore he can't get there. So if he defined the southernmost or middle of the tree, Dalad Amas, fine. Matzi Azal, he can go. But if he did not define it, perhaps he meant the northernmost end, and that's not within the space he's allowed to go to. So that's why Shmuel says it's not a valid Eruv in that particular case. Now, the next proof comes from Shmuel. Tanya Kava say to Shmuel, we have a brisa like Shmuel. Somebody lives in this courtyard here, or this village, and he made an Eruv 1,000 amma on each side. Now, normally, he'd be allowed to go 2,000 amma to one side or 2,000 amma to the other side. However, he now made an Eruv 1,000 amma out on one side and 1,000 amma out on the other side. Because he was mistaken and he thought you're allowed to do that. He thought you're allowed to make an Eruv on each side of the city. You're not. Wherever you make an Eruv, that defines a space, so you can only make an Eruv on one side. Or he thought you can make an Eruv on both sides. Or he told his servants, go make an Eruv for me. And each one went and made it the other way. One went to the north, one went to the south. So now, what can he do? He can't go 2,000 amma to the south, because if he does, he's gonna be outside of the 2,000 amma from the northern Eruv, and maybe the northern Eruv is correct. He can't go 2,000 ammas out to the north, because maybe the southern Eruv is the one, and he can't go beyond 2,000 ammas from there. So he can just go within the 2,000 ammas of the Eruv that he set. However, Mahalach letzafin keruva ladarim. So he can go to the north as much as the southernmost Eruv lets him. Uladarim keruva letzafin, and he can go to the south as much as the northernmost Eruv lets him. V'im mitzu alav, and if they made the Eruv as far as they can go, 2,000 amma, so now he's stuck because the northern Eruv doesn't allow him to go anything to the south, and the southern Eruv doesn't allow him to go anything to the north, so he's stuck at home. He can't move. In any case, what we see is that if someone is unsure where the Eruv is, then you're strict on both ends, but you can get to the Eruv. So too, just as in the case of this village, that you say that he's allowed to go 1,000 amma, 2,000 amma of the northernmost Eruv or the southernmost Eruv, you have to be strict, but it is a valid Eruv. So too over here, where you don't know where it is underneath the tree, it should also be allowed that you can go anywhere based on the strictest interpretation, but anywhere that the tree would allow you. And that's proof to Shmuel, not like Rav. So let's say this is a contradiction to Rav. So the Gemara says, indeed. However, Rav has a right to disagree with the Mishnah. Rav, Tana, Upalig. Rav is a Tana, and therefore he has a right to disagree.